Welcome back to Data Analytics Talks. So this is our fifth session of learning Informatica PowerCenter. So we are ready to start exploring PowerCenter interfaces or doing some hands-on. So what we have been doing is setting up the ground. So we should know what is Informatica as a tool. Then what is data warehousing? What are the building blocks of a data warehouse that we have seen in detail in our second video? And different architecture, different patterns that we have already explored. Then we saw, apart from data warehouse, we saw data mart. So data mart is again a subset of data warehouse, and that is dedicated for some businesses. Then we saw how the transformation works and what are the major transformations that happens during this ETL process. And we also seen detail about ETL, that is extract, transform and load process, which is basically the major portion and major responsibility, which is a major task of any data warehousing. So now today we are going to explore some more close to Informatica, which is nothing but the architecture, the PowerCenter architecture. So understand that Informatica PowerCenter has a client module and a server module. So first of all, you have to set up your server, that is your administrative console, and you have to configure certain services in the server. Then you have to configure your client. Then you make connection to your domain. Then you set up your client features. Okay, so let's see how that looks like. So as you already said, this is a PowerCenter Informatica PowerCenter Designer interface. Mostly the developers will be using this interface for developing your targets, your sources, your maplets, your transformations, and everything related to the ETL process. So if you look at here, you can see multiple projects are created, and each project will have the business components, the sources, the targets, then the cubes, the dimensions, the transformations, mappings, maplets, and any user defined functions. So this is a Informatica PowerCenter Designer. Then you may ask, what is this? This is the flagship product of Informatica, primarily used for extraction, transformation and load. So before coming to the client side, we will have to understand how the Informatica PowerCenter architecture. So I am moving on. So look at here. So you can see that in the center you can see a circle, and there is also something within the circle, that is the core, and you can see for a square. So what is this? So I will say Informatica domain. So that means everything is centered around Informatica domain, and in the domain you can see different services like repository services, reporting services, integration services, and node. So this whole part belongs to the server, and what you see as a square, like PowerCenter Designer or Workflow Manager, then Workflow Monitor and Repository Manager, they belong to the client module. Okay, so let's explore one of them one by one. So what's a repository service? So repository service is responsible for Informatica metadata and providing access to all these components. That's repository service. So in this, diagram, we can see this is in repository service, and this is responsible for managing the metadata and also everything related to access control. Then coming to integration service. So as the word integration, you mean it is responsible for the setting the target, getting the sources, and doing the transformation. That is all happening as part of the integration service. Then coming to the reporting service, all the reports are generated or supported by these reporting services. Okay, then we have the final components in the server side, that is nodes. The compute engine, we can call it as a compute engine. This computing platform where all the services are executed, that is nodes. So we have in the server side, we have the repository service, the reporting service, the integration service, and nodes. I hope this is very clear to you. So that means when you install your Informatica PowerCenter, you will have to set up your administrative console that is part of the server. Then you have to have another installer which is setting up the client. And what happens in the client, that we will see now. So we have the Informatica Designer. As I already shown you, the designer is a playground. Okay, it is where you are going to set the business components, the sources, the targets, the transformations, your mappings, maplets, and any user-defined function. That is what you are going to do as part of Informatica Designer. Okay, let's see what is happening with the Workflow Manager. So it is creating various objects like session, workflows, scheduling tasks, and executing workflows. So in the Workflow Manager, once you creating the mapping, the maplets, then you have to create a session, and you can associate a task to a session, and you can configure it as a scheduled job. Okay, you have to run your mappings using workflows. That is a Workflow Manager. And of course, while running the workflows, you have to monitor how the job is completed, how many records are moved, what are the task completion. All this actually we can monitor using a Workflow Manager. So monitoring workflows and tasks, viewing workflow and session logs, then monitoring statistics happens in this Workflow Manager. Okay, then along with that, so we have one more service called Repository Manager. In the Repository Manager, you can handle repository objects, then handling object permissions, then importing and exporting objects. So this is majorly happening around the Repository Manager. So as I was explaining, we have 4 services in the server and 4 interfaces or 4 services in the client. Just remember, reporting services, integration services, then repository services and nodes are part of server, and Informatica Designer, Workflow Manager, Workflow Monitor, Repository Manager are part of the client. So now we are closely looking at what is Informatica domain. As you see, this is highlighted in red. That means this is the center of the Informatica implementation, right? So we have to first set up your domain, then you connect all the services to the domain. So domain is the fundamental administrative unit in Informatica, and it supports the administration of distributed services and is a collection of nodes. And majorly there are 2 types of services in the domain. One is Service Manager and Application Services. So the Service Manager manages domain operations like authorization, authentication, and logging. And the Application Services represent the server, specific services like reporting service, then repository service, and integration services. So I will show you how the domain is configured in the Informatica as I am going to show the Informatica server administrative control in the next video. Just look for that. So now we have seen what goes into the server. There is a repository services, reporting services, integration services as part of the application services, and the nodes as part of the service manager. Okay, so now we will look into the client side components. The first thing is designer, the PowerCenter Designer. Already mentioned, this is responsible for importing source and targets, then creating mappings, then creating transformation. So that's where we will have the PowerCenter Designer. Then second one we have is Workflow Monitor. Already mentioned, like, so once you create your mappings, you take that into the Workflow Manager, you create your session, you create task, and you will be configuring and scheduling your task and executing the workflow. That's Workflow Manager. Then at the client side, you will have Workflow Monitor. The monitor means, as you understand, monitor is for monitoring how the workflows are running, how many tasks are completed, what are the activities, what is the logs. Everything can be monitored at the Workflow Manager side. Then the final to create, this is basically holding the repository objects, metadata, handling objects permissions, and importing and exporting objects that is managed by the repository manager. I think with this you are able to answer the client side services available for Informatica PowerCenter. They are Designer, Workflow Monitor, Workflow Manager, and Repository Manager. Okay. So I would like to show you the architecture diagram of PowerCenter 8, and maybe what we have already understood that we have a server component, we have a client component. Okay, and everything the PowerCenter is basically used for ETL. We have the sources, bring the data from the sources, then upload data to targets and carry out the transformation. For that, the domain, this sits as part of the server as a administrative control. Everything is console is part of the server, and we already find that there is integration service, there is repository service, there is also a reporting services, and a repository stores the metadata, and console is for managing all these services, configuring and managing all the services. And this is where the client comes. And the client, you have the repository, designer, workflow, and workflow monitor. I think if you understand this much, this is more than enough. We have repository service, integration service, reporting service, and nodes. Then Informatica Designer, Workflow Manager, Workflow Monitor, and Repository Manager. With that, we have come to the end of this module. I hope you are able to understand the architecture of PowerCenter. In the next module, I will take you to the PowerCenter Administrative Console module. I will make you a walkthrough, and also I will show you how the PowerCenter Designer installation. And after that, we will be setting up our development environment. We will tell you how to install, how to set up PowerCenter. So stay tuned. And if you are not subscribed this channel, please make sure you do that to get all the latest updates in data analytics and AI. Thank you.